I'm Jacobina, born in Salinas, up in the north of Minas Gerais. I was assaulted by my father and my brother. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and a comment telling from where in this big world you speak. In a time when women spoke softly and men hit hard. My name wasn't supposed to be Jacobina, no. It was supposed to be Maria, as my grandmother wanted. But my mother said that Maria was a name for weak people, for people who only served to carry suffering. She chose Jacobina because she thought it was strong, strong as a stone, strong like the dry ground that cracked beneath her feet. And maybe she was right, because I needed to be stone my whole life. But I was also water. I molded, slipped, swallowed dry, and I stayed. I lived. I was born in a mud hut surrounded by mandakaru and silence. My father, Severino, was a man with hands too big to be gentle. Hands for chopping wood, for bleeding pigs, for hitting women. My mother, Alzira, was mute with pain and spoke more with her eyes than with her mouth. She was afraid of him. And I learned early that my mother's fear was a warning for me. I was 5 when my father's hands stopped being just heavy and became wrong. He would call me to the corral, saying he would teach me to take care of the calf, but what he did was hold me against his body and whisper things I didn't even understand. I only felt, and I cried silently. Because my mother said that those who cry loudly attract misfortune. My brother Tonico was older than me. He was 12 when he started to do like our father. And that's when I understood that what was happening to me wasn't just ugly, it was evil. It was rotten. But I couldn't tell anyone. In Salinas, a girl who talks too much becomes a bad name, and the bad name is always the guilty one. I grew up with a hole in my chest, a hole where childhood, lightness, and laughter should live. But only darkness resided there. I discovered the weight of silence long before I learned to write, because nobody taught me to speak, but everyone forced me to be quiet. By the age of 8, I already knew how to avoid my father's gaze, my brother's steps, the shadow behind the door. I spent more time with the chickens than with people. The chickens didn't ask anything, and I didn't need to hide from them what I hid even from myself. Sometimes my mother looked at me differently, with pity, with anger, with guilt. I never knew. All I know is that she would give me a piece of bread secretly when my father left me abandoned on the porch, with torn clothes and dry eyes. Once, she held me in her lap, just once, and cried on my hair. It was that day I understood that she knew, and that she couldn't do anything. At school, I was the girl in the corner. The one who didn't speak. The one who lived with sunken eyes and bruised knees. The teacher called me the faded one. They said I was strange, but nobody asked why. No one wanted to know what a sad girl had to tell. At 11, I stopped going to school. My father said that women don't need letters. They need to know how to wash, give birth, and obey. And I obeyed. Because we learned that disobeying hurts, and because I no longer had the strength to fight against anything. Tonico grew older, crueler, more like our father. He pushed me in the corral, laughed at me, called me a dog without an owner. He told me I was his, and that a man doesn't share a woman. I wasn't a woman, but he treated me as if I were already old enough to be everything he wanted. My body grew without me having time to understand what a body was. I just wanted to disappear. At 13, I had my first period. My mother took me to the river, taught me how to wash my underwear, and told me with her eyes downcast, "Now you're a woman for good. Take care of yourself." Take care, but of what? Of whom? It was that year that Tonico pushed me hard and made me fall on a piece of stone. It split my eyebrow. The blood ran hot down my face, and I screamed for the first time in years. My mother ran. My father followed. And when he saw me on the ground, instead of asking what happened, he hit me. Said I was offering myself. That this was what happened when I kept showing myself to men. That night, I ran away. I didn't go far. I slept in the yard of an old woman who lived in the woods and who sheltered me for 2 days. Then she took me back, said that a girl alone in the world was meat for the vultures. But something changed in me after that. Pain turned into anger. Shame turned into hatred. And fear, I swallowed fear. I learned to hide it deep inside, along with the desire to die I felt every time my father locked the door. At 15, I was already old inside. My body was that of a girl, but my soul seemed to have been washed with sulfur. I no longer dreamed. I expected nothing from anyone. I only counted the days. and I don't even know why. Perhaps waiting for time to pass until I turned to dust, as my grandmother said everyone would one day. Tanako left home to work on a distant farm. When he left, I breathed a little. Just a little. Because my father was still there. He had dry eyes, an unshaven beard, the breath of cachaça, and a deep voice that sent shivers down my spine. I knew his footsteps just by the sound of his boots on the clay floor. I knew the tone of his breathing. I knew his scent, even in the dark. My mother lived in silence. She was no longer a person. She was a shadow. She walked hunched over, with her hands always busy spinning or washing. She never stood still, as if stopping would let the past bite her. It was on my 16th birthday that a man named Clementino showed up at our house. He came to sell medicine to my father. He was older, about 40, claimed to be a man of respect. He talked a lot, looked at me as if measuring cattle at a fair. Days later, he returned with a proposal. He wanted to take me as a woman. They offered me as one would offer a fat chicken. My father accepted, said I was already of age and that better him than another. Clementino brought a bottle of liquor in exchange, and I went along. I was married without wanting to marry. I left home without saying goodbye to myself. Clementino took me to a small village called Paheu, about 3 leagues from Salinas. His house was made of old wood, with a bed pressed against the wall and a wood stove that smoked to the soul. His mother lived with us and looked at me suspiciously. She said that young women were frivolous by nature, that I needed to be proper. Clementino didn't hit me, but he also didn't look at me. He just used me. Sometimes at night, sometimes in the morning, I closed my eyes and pretended to be somewhere else, a place where no one touched me, where I was just Jacobina and not a used body. At 17, I lost my first child. It was a heavy bleeding that left me bedridden for weeks. No one took me to the doctor. God knows what he does, they said. And I thought, does he really? Then I had another and another. I lost 2. The third survived, a boy. I named him João, a name of hope. He was born small but cried loudly. When I heard that cry, something opened inside me. I hugged that baby with the strength of someone holding their own heart for the first time. But Clementino didn't like it. Said that boys cry too much, that children are a burden, that those who gave birth should manage. So I managed. I held João in my arms and rocked him until he slept, until he grew, until he smiled. And in that smile, I saw a thread of life, a little beam of light in that tunnel that seemed endless. When João turned 2, I realized that life could be more than just surviving. He ran around the yard barefoot and laughed as if the world wasn't ugly, as if no one had ever touched him with malice. That gave me strength, made me want to stay alive just to see how far that boy would go. Clementino continued to be a man of few words and much weight. He didn't yell, but every gesture was a silent demand. He expected me to wake up before the sun, to wash clothes even with a fever, to serve his plate as if it were the last piece of dignity in the house. And at night, he took me as if I were an obligation, not a choice. His mother fell ill. Tuberculosis, they said. She coughed blood and slept with a warm cloth on her chest. I took care of her with the same dedication I took care of João, because I learned that a woman cares even when no one cares for her. In the midst of this turmoil, I met Dona Nininha. She was a healer from the village, one of those wise women with a deep gaze and a low voice. One day she saw me at the well and asked why I lived with my soul turned inward. I didn't even know how to answer. I just lowered my eyes. She invited me to learn from her. Tea, blessings, midwifery. Said I had the hands of a strong woman. I started visiting her house whenever I could. I took João in my arms, sat on the doorstep, and learned about leaves, herbs, prayers. It was the first time in my life that someone looked at me as a person. With her, I learned that I could help other women. I began to attend births in the village. I saw lives being born with pain and hope, and that made me forget for a few hours what had been done to me. Clementino didn't like it. Said that a woman's place was at home, that I was getting involved with witchcraft. But I already had a spark lit inside me, and that wasn't easily extinguished. I started hiding coins I earned from the births. I hid them under the mattress among old cloths. For the first time, I collected money with a name, Escape. At 23, I was the mother of 2. I had a girl, Rosa, small, delicate, with an attentive gaze, and it was for her that I decided I wouldn't repeat the story. that my daughter wouldn't grow up afraid of men, that no one would silence her like they silenced me. On a moonless night, with Yoel in my arms and Rosa wrapped in a sheet, I tucked the few coins into my waistband and left down the dirt road. I left Clementino sleeping, left the wooden house, left the name of an obedient woman behind. I ran away. I walked leagues, hitchhiked on a milkman's truck, accepted a plate of food at a church door. I arrived in Montes Claros with 2 children, a bundle of clothes, and a heart trembling with fear and freedom. There I started over. Montes Claros wasn't easy for those who arrived empty-handed and marked in soul, but I had the courage of someone who has been invisible and decided to be seen. I arrived at a small boarding house where the owner was a rough man, but he didn't ask too many questions. He accepted the little money I had and gave us a corner for the children and me. The first night, Yoel and Rosa slept curled up on the cold floor. I had no crib, no decent blanket. I only had the promise that it would work out. I found work washing clothes in the homes of neighborhood ladies. My fingers became calloused, my back ached, but dignity felt like a light burden. I felt alive again. Sometimes the longing for Salinas tightened my throat. But I remembered what I left behind: fear, violence, the silence that swallowed everything. At school, the teacher looked at my children with a different fondness. I enrolled in a literacy class for women, where I learned to put together the letters that formed the word freedom. It was in one of those classes that I met Mr. Jose, an old man who sold bread in the square and always smiled when he saw me pass. He said I had eyes that carried a lot of stories. And I thought, yes, stories, but I didn't want to carry that one anymore. Over time, I began to dream of a different life. I wanted my children to study, to have a voice, to have choices. I wanted the Jacobina of the past to be just a shadow, and their mother to be an example. But life doesn't spare anyone. At 30, I lost Rosa to a fever that wouldn't pass. I lost my girl, my piece of heaven. I cried like never before, and for the first time, I screamed at God. Why take who needed me the most? Joel felt my pain and remained silent, but he was the one who gave me strength to carry on. Come on, Mom, he said. I'll be strong for both of us. And so we went on. After losing Rosa, life became harder, but also clearer. I couldn't give up. I couldn't leave Joel alone. He needed me, and I needed him. I worked like never before. I washed clothes, cooked, did odd jobs in families' homes, and even sold fruits at the market. It was a struggle that took my breath away, but each day I saved a little money, a bit of hope. Yuan grew up knowing that the world isn't fair, but that we can be strong. He studied, helped at home, and reminded me that I had to keep moving forward, even when the pain tightened my chest. At 40, I managed to open a small snack shop on the corner of the neighborhood. It was a small dream, but it was mine. I made tapiocas, cakes, freshly brewed coffee, and the neighbors started to come. It was little, but it was dignity. A few years later, Yuan left to work in the big city. It was hard to see him go, but I knew he needed to. Out there, he could be the man our father never was, who was never Tonico, who was never Clementino. I stayed there, taking care of the shop, praying for his luck, hoping he would find a path I never had. Little by little, the pain became a bit smaller, but the scar didn't disappear. Those wounds from childhood, from youth, were tattooed on my skin and in the way I was. Still, at 50, I felt alive, and that was what mattered. As the years went by, my body began to complain. My hands became more tremulous, my back more hunched. The pains that I used to feel only in my chest now settled in all over my body. But the spirit, oh the spirit, that remained strong, even when my bones seemed to want to give up. At 60, I sold the little shop. I no longer had the strength for daily work. With the money from the sale, I bought a simple little house with a porch and a garden where I planted flowers for Rosa and for the others who came after. Yuan was already a grown man, with his own family. Sometimes he came to visit me, and I would sit in the rocking chair on the porch to listen to his stories. I felt proud, even if I didn't say it. Proud of his struggle, of the courage he had to be different. The years brought losses. I lost friends, I lost neighbors, I lost dreams. But they also brought small moments of peace. A smile here, a friendly word there, the visit of a grandchild, a tight hug. At 75, I started attending the neighborhood church, not for religion, but for community. I needed to feel part of something, of someone. The faith I had transformed. It was no longer fear, it was comfort. Today, at 85, I look back and see a life marked by pain, yes, but also by resistance. I see a woman who survived everything she shouldn't have survived. I see a story that perhaps no one wants to tell, but that needs to be heard. And I tell it, so that no one feels alone, so that other women know that pain can exist, but that the strength to continue can exist too. I am Jacobina, and this is my story.